All right. Well, first of all, welcome to our country, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us. I hope that this talk will give not only us, but also the population some insight on how Americans see our country, especially related to the mining sector. Just to do a quick introduction of you, you're a former Chief of Staff for the Office of International Affairs at the Department of Energy during the former Trump administration. You worked on Trump's administration's South Asia strategy. And today you're Director of GreenMet, an organization with a mission to represent the private sector's interest in developing mining for rare earth minerals to supply the US. And you have traveled our country along the coast and were most recently here about 3 months ago in Nuuk. Is there anything I've left out?
No, I spent a little time also, working at the White House, and we've been looking in the last 4 years to really coordinate and organize U.S. investment options so that ideally we could be helpful now.
Mm. And in your own words, what brings you to Greenland this time?
Well, I personally think that Greenland has just unlimited potential to do things in multiple sectors. I think that Greenland and the United States and Canada and Denmark and basically all the European countries have a real opportunity to work together to develop in a way where all parties benefit. I think that, there's a lot of noise and I think, probably inaccurate information and things that we're not, a part of, but the one silver lining or the benefit is that now I think there's a lot of focus on Greenland. And what I would like to do is represent a non-political interest of U.S. investors that are looking to basically ask the question to Greenlanders, what is it you would like and how could we help?
And at this time, I've been reading that you're arriving with a private delegation to Greenland. Can you tell us a bit more about how many are you and which people does this private delegation consist of?
Well, so normally when we travel, we bring about 4 to 5 other CEOs and investors. So we've got the same model this time. We've got a large strategic partner back in the United States that's looking to kind of lead most of the larger investments. So they're the primary group that we're representing. We've also obviously got the leadership of Tanbreeze that we're working with, and we're going to visit the mine and the site as myself and a lot of public and private entities from the United States are looking to find ways to finance that and develop it. And then we also have some folks that are from the energy and energy storage sectors, right? The new ways of doing solar energy storage to support a lot of expansion, and finally also looking to develop things in the fishery space. So we have a company that is with us that is looking to potentially build out some of the sustainable seaweed development that seems so exciting.
And can you tell us a bit more about GreenMet?
So GreenMet is a private U.S. company that I founded after coming out of the White House, seeing a need for a lot of additional investment and investors. So our initial investor was a company called the Libra Group out of London and New York. One of our initial early partners is a company called Cerberus Capital out of New York City, so a large private investment group. I worked with their founder previously when we both worked at the White House, but he's moved on now. He's the Deputy Secretary of Defense, but his colleagues are doing a lot of investment in this area. And I actually worked with him about 4 years ago to do the first rare earth project that they invested in, working with us, and we're still developing it. It was in Canada, but the idea was that there could be purchasers and customers back in the United States. And so we're continuing to develop that and hoping that maybe Tanbreeze might have a similar model.
And can you tell me a bit about how did your interest in Greenland start?
Well, so I've always had an interest in mining rich areas. So, my extended family back in the United States, traditionally spent a lot of time mining coal. That's kind of my family lineage. And so we like to think that we contributed in a small way, to kind of the industrial revolution in the United States. And so I've had a passion for geology and minerals for a long time. But I think Greenland represents just not only a tremendous friend and partner of the United States and Canada, but also just a country that has so much potential across multiple sectors. And so I came here initially leading a U.S. Government delegation about 6 years ago and fell in love with the country and have tried to come back as much as possible. I came back during the pandemic in a private capacity. I just really have fallen in love, right? And as I said, that's why I'm looking to, bring my wife and daughter to our family vacation here. But I think it just represents opportunity and growth that can be done between friends the right way.
And which type of minerals are you interested in, or are the private investors that you're representing interested in?
So collectively, we're most interested in rare earths, but I would say in all what we call technology metals, and metals that are needed for electric transition, for development of high-speed electronics and electric vehicles. We're very interested in the aluminum space as well, too. One of the projects that we're looking at is a hydroelectric dam that would potentially power clean aluminum, potentially data centers. Those are the kinds of opportunities that we're looking at and that I think excite myself and my co-investors the most.
And speaking about the hydro plant, is that especially in the south of Greenland, or which are you referring to?
Well, it's kind of in the vicinity of Sisimiut. So we're thinking that, and I'm working with some Greenlandic partners on the ground. We're thinking to basically put a proposal together that would be comprehensive. And we're looking to try and craft it the way that the local population would prefer. And so, we have a very open mind and an ask to try and shape it as best makes sense.
When the new airport in Nuuk were established, China showed an interest in investing in the airport. The development of the airport. That was seen as a soft power move from the Chinese, which was squashed by the US and Denmark, that we didn't want Chinese influence up here in Greenland. What would you say to the critics that sees your interest in the mining industry and in the energy industry equally as a soft power move towards Greenland and public opinion?
Well, I guess I would ask that people just give me a chance to prove that what I say I'm doing, I'm actually doing. We try to be as transparent as possible. And so the group of investors and business leaders that I represent literally are just looking to develop things in ways that, are profitable, but that bring real growth, to the areas where they are as desired, right? So, we're looking at clean mining operations that have elements of automation, but there'd still be a lot of jobs and development that would go with that. Potentially, there could be expansion into commercial ports and things of that nature. I understand there will be skeptics, especially based off of, my background, who I used to work for, that will say this is, some sort of Trojan horse or effort to execute soft power influence. I guess I would just ask, let me prove it to you. Let me prove that what we are doing has no strings attached, that it isn't some sort of disguised move, but really is just economic growth and opportunity. I'm happy to open up my books, to open up any of the details on the projects and investors. And I think that once people see that, they'll see that truthfully, this is just business opportunity if it's desired.
And also, President Trump, alongside the tech industry names such as Elon Musk, has talked about the need to secure minerals from Greenland, just as you say, for tech industry. But how much of an interest would you say the private investors in the US has in the Greenlandic mining sector? Because it's hard to establish a mine up here, especially in Arctic conditions.
Right. Well, to be fair, it's hard to establish a mine anywhere, right? And so the group of investors that I'm working with is very bullish about wanting to invest in these opportunities, not just in mining, but also in energy development, the fisheries, other areas, Having conversations like with my private counterparts, there's a desire to deploy, $10 billion US as quickly as possible into these opportunities. And it's not just because there's a lot of political talk and things on social media about it. It's because there is a legitimate window of opportunity, I think. We have major buy-in, like I said, from these institutional US investors. And I think they see an opportunity in Greenland, especially as things are a little bit disrupted on the global scale. I think now is our opportunity to realign new partnerships. And I think there are partnerships here where the United States, Greenland, Denmark, Canada, all of us, we can all benefit and achieve development of our own interests together as, true friends and partners. And so I think those investors see that opportunity as a time to also make a very large, financial benefit from that as well, too.
The former government here in Greenland and also the current government, the new government, has the saying that we are open for business. But the development of the mining sector in Greenland has been a topic for debate, especially 2 elections ago here. where an overwhelming majority were against the mining uranium down in the southern parts of Greenland. Since then, the former government has formed a policy for mining where the local population will be more involved in projects. There needs to be a plan for the closure of the mine so it harms the environment as little as possible. And also new infrastructure has to be built that has to also have a plan for how it can be used by the local population after the closure of the mine. In the recent election, the now governing party, Demokratiet, has criticized the amount of environmental regulations, although they are now in line with the former government's policies. So one thing is building new infrastructure and mines in Arctic conditions, but with an American point of view, how does these regulations affect the business case here in Greenland?
Well, regulations are always an important part of environmental protection and also protecting people that live in the area, right? So like I said, I come from a mining family where we live next to these mines and know what this is like very well. I think it's about doing things right and doing it in a manner that selectively uses the right projects, right? So, one of the things I like about the projects we're looking at is that they comply with the current regulations and that they don't have uranium concerns and things of that nature. I think there's ways to develop some of the regulations so that they support the right kind of sustainable, responsible mining, but at the same time don't put the environment and local people at risk, right? I mean, the points of trying to ensure that there is no uranium exposure to anyone on the ground are fully justified, right? We fully support that, and it makes perfect sense.
The amount of regulations we have here in Greenland and the amount of involvement for the local population is a sort of different culture from the American culture. What you're saying here, does that also represent the private investors over in the US? Are they as willing to go along with opening mines with that much regulation and having in mind the local population?
Yes, I think, just to be frank, I think it's undertold that we deal with a lot of that in the United States. The local population always has a very significant vote in any of our projects. We see it the same way in Greenland. And so if we don't have local populist buy-in, then we wouldn't want to develop a project because we don't want to be at odds of the people that we're looking to help, right? And so once again, that's why I come back to projects like Tanbury's and others where they're being done with the guidance of the local population, working with the current government, the regulations. The government, and I'll leave it to the government to make their own decisions. They can look at regulatory reform, but I think it has to be done in a way where the environment and the population are still protected. I think it can be, and I think that this government is looking to do that, and I'm excited to see it.
From the private investors' point of view in the US, what are some of the things that they're in talks about wanting from the Greenlandic government to make it more interesting to invest for them?
Well, I think they would want, just fair terms for customers back in the United States. I don't think there's as much demand or, requests even of the Greenlandic government above what they're already doing. Like I said, I think there's a lot of confusing information out there, right? And I'm not a politician. I'll let the politicians do the talking on policy and a lot of national interests of different countries. But I think really what the Greenlandic government already has and is offering is just what my investors are looking for, right? So, as we come here, we're not asking, honestly, for any changes. We're just asking for the opportunity to, prove that we are what we say we are and we can do what we say we can do, and then to build and develop this together.
And the word fair terms can mean a lot of things, but what do you put in those words?
Well, I think that everyone involved has to benefit, right? And so my thought is that there needs to be a sustainable friendship and partnership for growth, right? So, in terms of purchase price, that will be determined by, the local developers and things of that nature. All of that has to be worked out into a sustainable long-term business equation and friendship. And so I think that's really all that we're looking for. We're looking to make sure that there's a dialogue, right, that's independent of any of the sort of the political noise that's going on, and that we can really look at just presenting and developing real projects, real timelines, bringing in real commercial partners and commitments and promises to develop, real growth. I mean, that's really what we're looking for.
Previously, we had a state-owned national mining company, Nuna Minerals. Just 2 months ago, during the election, two of the left-leaning parties, Nutaarsiassat and Siumut, now coalition partners in the government, talked about establishing a new state-owned company. What is your assessment concerning the willingness of the American private sector to invest in such an endeavor?
Well, I think it's interesting to look at different options to move things forward. I won't comment on whether a state-owned company makes sense or not. I guess I would just recommend that any of these ideas in development, are ones where ideally, they're primarily led by local Greenlanders, but you have the opportunity for real investors from the United States, from Denmark, from Canada, from Great Britain, other places to really come and just talk about how they are hoping to offer their structuring options, right? And then I think that can be incorporated in the building of a state entity or in development of various projects.
So you're also interested in collaborations with the Danish government or with the EU, or
yes.
How do you see those possibilities?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking for collaboration and co-investment and co-development with any party that's open to it, and any party that is willing to do it in a way where the Greenlanders benefit, and we're mainly looking at free market principles. And so, even on our way here, we spent some time in Copenhagen. We were meeting with local business and government leaders. We'll do the same on our way back. We're certainly not counter-Danish. I think a multilateral investment and development strategy makes sense. What I would love to see for a lot of these projects are a combination of investors from, the United States, ideally from Greenland and Denmark as well, ideally Canadian. We're talking to entities and partners in places like South Korea and elsewhere in Iceland and Norway that would like to be a part of this, seeing the great business potential.
Can you give a realistic timeline from your point of view? When could an American-backed mine open in Greenland, and where do you see the potential sites that it could be located?
Well, we have partners across different, mineral components in the mining space. We have a partner that's already, in production right now in the Nutaarsiassat, category, right? So that timeline is already at producing now. The larger mines that require a little bit more development and growth, I think, we're looking to be at ideally demonstration production capacity, inside of 18 months or so. So we're talking 1.5 years or so until we could be at a scale where we're producing and selling some of that concentrate in small volume. And then I would think another couple years after that for most of these major massive projects before you could be at full commercial production. But you're talking about timelines realistically, conservatively, that are 1 to 3 years for most of these. So it is difficult to do Arctic mining. It is difficult to do mining in general. There's a statistic out there that your average mine globally, it takes 20 years to develop. But that is not necessarily taking into account projects that have had a lot of work that has been done, that have unique offerings. So we have everything, from, like I said, from partners that are currently in production to larger, more massive scale growth that, if it's desired and funded the right way, could be at large scale production inside of a few years. And so I think a lot of this can be relatively near term in terms of generation of large amounts of revenue.
There's been some speculation now up here surrounding the motives behind President Trump's desire to acquire Greenland. One of those is that it could bypass the regulations concerning the future mining industry we have. What is your take on that, given the proximity and knowledge you have about the Trump administration?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for President Trump. And I would say, I think a lot of the messaging, it gets complicated and confused, right? Like I said, I won't speak for the White House, but I find this politically charged term of acquirement, acquisition, I don't think it's realistic. I think a lot of this is sort of business talk and things of that nature. So I haven't heard serious conversations about plans to try and make a move along those lines. I think what really is desired is what's actually desired amongst all parties, right? Which is the Greenlandic people deciding their own destiny and doing it in a way where there's trade that benefits us from a U.S. perspective, but also our Danish and NATO partners, right? And so I think, what I gather is that President Trump is looking to find ways to shore up security and partners with our neighbors, right? I've had conversations with leaders from Greenland, from Denmark, where they say, well, what is it we're in disagreement on? And I say nothing really. There's a lot of noise and conversations, but I think collectively we all want to work together to ensure that we are securing each other, that we're watching each other's backs, that we're providing security. There's nothing hidden, there's no secrets. And so I think you can see with that, there really isn't anything that we're involved in that's attempted to be a workaround over regulations, if you will.
We saw with the mining company, the Australian mining company that tried to open this mine down in the certain parts of Greenland, that has been called also a Chinese company because they had Chinese investors. So where are the lines about being a private company and then also yourself having connections or former connection with the White House and the Trump administration?
Well, it's always an interesting relationship when you're a business leader of a private business in a company and in a country where you need to engage with the leadership of your country, right? So as a leader of this private effort, it's my responsibility and obligation to ensure that I'm communicating in official and appropriate capacities with Washington, with the White House, and also with the leadership here and anywhere else where we're looking to do business. And so, there's a relationship out of necessity that goes along there. I think where the lines need to be drawn is we have our own private agenda, and our own private agenda is, conditions-free, no strings attached, private development, right? And so there may be options where the government, of the United States looking to provide assistance for some of these projects may offer to allow us to apply for federal funding. I will say that for the Tambreez project, we are in the process of applying for a public-private partnership where the United States government would also co-invest. I think the idea would be to do that with investors from Greenland as well. But there's a relationship that comes with that. So obviously I need to have that communication, but I'm not bound by it, right? So like I said, I no longer work for the United States government. I'm fully a private business leader, and I make my own decisions based off private business needs.
And just soon after the election that we had up here at the 11th of March, there was a historic demonstration against the US, both here in Nuuk and also in Sisimiut, which has been called maybe the biggest demonstration in this country's history. It's close tie, some people say, with the demonstrations against the EU back in the days. But how has that pushback and those demonstrations impacted your work in establishing a relationship between the US and Greenland?
Well, I think it's clarified for me that I need to be very exact on my message of what I'm looking to offer and what we're looking to offer collectively from a U.S. private business capacity. I think the messaging on the political side has gotten messy and, like I said, confusing. Like I said, I haven't heard of any conversation or thought where there's meant to be any effort to acquire, annex Greenland or force Greenland in any way to become a part of the United States. I know there's a lot of narrative, and I won't, speak to everything that's said in the press. We have no connection to any of that conversation whatsoever. And so I actually understand and respect a lot of the demonstrations because I interpreted them, and I conveyed this to my investors, as people of Greenland standing up for the sovereignty of Greenland, which I think is important, and we fully support. So, we're not looking to come here, like I said, with strings attached or conditions. And so what I've said to my investors is we have to be crystal clear. The last time I came here, my message was confused. I came here looking to do business development, and there was allegations that I was, here in some capacity representing my former boss, President Trump, or things of that nature. I can understand where those allegations came from, but it just wasn't my intent.
It's not unusual to see on social media platforms such as X that Americans has been visiting Nuuk and visiting Greenland, saying that they have met with government representatives. But when we try to factor check that, we can't get any politician to say that they actually met with these persons. Can you maybe lift off the hood of the car a little bit about GreenMed and show us the engine? Tell us Have you been meeting with the people from the government, maybe the Minister Nayana Tayelsen from Minister of Minerals?
So I've had a lot of these relationships for years, right? So I first started coming back here, I think in 2018, 2019. So I've known a lot of the folks that are in government and have some relationships that predate current times that I've maintained. I have met with her over the years. I didn't last time I was here. I think that from my understanding, the government wants to do a lot of development with the United States, but it's gotten complicated recently because of messaging. And so we fully respect the government protocols. And so my team here has put in requests to meet with the respective ministers and staff. And so we're planning to do that. Those are scheduled as they see fit. But we're also trying to make sure that we're, especially now, doing all of our meetings in full diplomatic openness and proper procedure, right? And so, Sabrina, who's with me, who runs our external affairs, she's set up a full calendar of meetings. We're meeting with who the government thinks we should meet with at whatever level. And so we're not even asking for specific ministers or personnel. We're just saying, look, this is what we would like to do. We'd like to meet with the appropriate people on your team, and whoever that is, we'd be very thankful and grateful to have that conversation. That's how we're proceeding now. In times past, especially I think when there was just uncertainty of who to talk to during the election workup, people were having private meetings and meeting based off of friendships. Obviously, I still have friends that hold various positions, and I respect those very much. We're just trying to make sure that we're, meeting in ways that kind of is very transparent and open, and using the proper protocol of the Greenlandic government, who we need to respect, and whose authority and positioning we need to respect and very much want to.
And have you been meeting with the other parties, such as the opposition party?
I've met with a variety of people that wanted to meet to represent what they thought were Greenlandic interests. So we don't take sides, or we don't have parties that we prefer to work with over others. I have basically an open request and invitation to anyone that wants to speak in either a public or private capacity about what they think Greenland would want and would benefit from in terms of what I offer, which is large-scale U.S. investment and technology partners. So I've met with folks from various parties that have ideas in that capacity, and I would still like to do so in the capacity as a private business leader.
And how do your program look the next couple of days being here in Greenland?
It looks very exciting, right? So we've got a lot of meetings. We're very excited to move down to the south and to go do our site visit and look at port facilities and things of that nature. We're excited to come back to Nuuk and to meet with government and other officials locally. We're going to also do a site visit of the area that we think would be potentially good for the seaweed development that's in the greater Nuuk area. And so, we're going to be taking a boat out there and, sort of seeing that on the ground. I think all of that it's going to be very active, but very exciting and beneficial. And so I think we've got a good week or so in Greenland to see a lot, explore a lot, and really have a lot of great conversations.
I want to thank you so much for your time to talk with us here, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And once again, hoping this is the next of many trips back to Greenland, and anyone that wants to talk or has ideas on how they think we potentially could bring investment or development, would just welcome them. We really are an open book. We would just like to hear, what the hopes, dreams, and plans might be, and see if there's any way that we can help with them.
Thank you.
Thank you.